We talk OU football with all of you each and every week live, at least once a week. We got Parker Thune on the line, of course, from OU Insider on Rivals. KREF Sports, 12 to 3 Central Time, Monday through Friday. Let's talk it up. Much to talk about. Parker's been running all over the place, keeping track of where Oklahoma is headed next on a number of fronts. Parker, how you doing?
Doing well, Mark. It's been a crazy couple days, as you mentioned.
Yeah, we will get to the possible candidates for the offensive coordinator position, but let's start with Jeff Lebby's performance. Uh, you're not going to please everyone. Oklahoma could score 50 points a game, and there would be folks that would say, well, we would like to see a couple more passes downfield. There's always the nitpickers. But in regards to Jeff Lebby, came, of course, via Ole Miss with a big reputation. Just your thoughts about how he handled the offense.
Yeah, I think Jeff Lebby's a great hire for Mississippi State because at a place like that where you have, well, I guess I can phrase it this way. You're fighting an uphill battle to be competitive in the SEC because you don't have the history, the tradition, the lineage of excellence, and the resources that a lot of other programs in that conference do. So you kind of got to go outside the box. And I think Lebby's offense in the SEC, it's not a complete outlier, right? But it is outside the box relative to what has traditionally been the norm in the SEC as far as offensive schemes and principles go. And so I think it's a good hire for Mississippi State. I know a lot of OU fans had beef with the way that Lebby piloted the Oklahoma offense through his 2 years as offensive coordinator. I did not. I think when you look at the hand he was dealt and what he was able to do with it, being part of Oklahoma attaining double-digit wins in year 2 of the Venables era, which certainly was commensurate with the highest expectations that anybody had for OU heading into the season. You look at the statistics, you look at the performance of a guy like Dillon Gabriel, the emergence of the wide receivers, the balance that the Sooners were able to cultivate down the stretch when they found an answer at running back. Was he perfect? No, nobody is, right? Coaches make mistakes just as players do, but I was very pleased, very impressed with the way that Jeff Lebby ran the Oklahoma offense as the sole play caller. And, certainly having covered OU on a full-time basis for some time now, Lebby's a guy that I've gotten a lot of firsthand experience interacting with, somebody that I've grown to admire as a football mind, and obviously wish him the best at Mississippi State. Again, that job comes with challenges I'm sure he's aware of, but he's somebody that if he's able to surround himself with the right people down in Starkville, they'll have the opportunity to win games.
Absolutely. And now we look at an opening and we can get to some candidates. But before we do, of course, the standards are extremely high. This has been a high flying offense basically for 20 plus years now, since the days of Josh Heupel himself, then, of course, certainly Jason White, and it really took off from there. Do you think, sometimes we see when there's a replacement made that they go an opposite direction if there were failings in that head coach or coordinator position, but when things were relatively clean, good, when he had, Dillon Gabriel on the field, do you think that they will probably stay in that same lane in regards to style and approach?
I know that is their preference, Mark, and it ultimately is going to come down to a lot of factors in the search. Who's interested, how much money you can spend, what the timeline is for each of these candidates, right? There's so much to consider, but I think it's worth noting, as you said, over the last quarter century, Oklahoma has not made a bad hire at offensive coordinator. The one guy who was fired was Josh Heupel. You see where he's at as a coach these days. I think most would acknowledge that whatever shortcomings he displayed at Oklahoma were not indicative of his ability. They were indicative of an inability to live up to an exceedingly high standard that had been established in the 15 years prior. Now, I know a lot of Oklahoma fans would like to see a guy that has called plays before. They would like to see a guy with some experience, preferably at the Power 5 level, that has a history dialing up top-flight offenses. The thing is, I don't think that's a prerequisite. Heck, I look back to 2000, the last time Oklahoma won a national championship. They did it with a first-year play caller in Mark Mangino. So the Sooners have one of the best athletic directors in the country in Joe Castiglione. Some would say the best. And when you look at the hires he has made over the years, not just in football, but across all sports, he has a reputation for consistently delivering the right person at the right time. And obviously, Venables, as the head coach, is going to have a ton of input on this hire. There will be other folks that have a ton of input as well. But Joe Castiglione seems to have that Midas touch over the years where whoever he tabs, they end up being golden for the University of Oklahoma. I expect nothing different regardless of who the offensive coordinator ends up being.
Brent Venables, you of course know personally. I don't. He seems to come across as a guy who's a really good balance of being a people person, but a nuts and bolts football guy, because there would be some people that I would think, okay, they are simply going for who's laid out the best results, period. And I want that guy. I want to go for the guy that's going to give us the best offensive production. There'd be other head coaches that would lean a little bit more. I got to work with this guy. This has to be a right fit from a personality standpoint and approach, leading young men, just a culture fit. Where do you think Brent Venables stands on that meter?
Well, I think Venables is, how can I put this? He's a guy that trusts his intuition. And I think the perfect example of this was when just about 2 years ago at this time, I think today is the 2-year anniversary of Lincoln Riley announcing his departure. But 2 years ago, when Venables was building out his first staff at Oklahoma, one of his very first hires was Miguel Chavis as defensive ends coach, a guy that he had worked with at Clemson, but that had never before been an on-field assistant at any level. And so that was an out-of-the-box hire. And it was one that many folks looked at and kind of cocked their heads over, right? Because a place like Oklahoma, you're generally not getting a guy that young who is that inexperienced relative to other candidates that could be in the mix to be an on-field assistant when you only have 11 of those slots on a given staff, right? And so Chavis's hiring was met with plenty of surprise, I would say, by fans and pundits alike. But in the 2 years since, Chavis has proven to be invaluable to this Oklahoma program, both for his recruiting acumen, the way that he connects with players, not just his own, but pretty much any member of the locker room. And he has certainly developed a reputation as somebody that knows ball, knows the game, and the players that he is teaching on a day-to-day basis, the players he's sharpening, they respect his input. They respect him as a leader and as a coach. And all in all, that hire has been darn near an A+ for Brent Venables. And so regardless of who the offensive coordinator is, I think as long as Oklahoma makes the decision to go with a guy, maybe not the guy, but a guy that Venables is comfortable with, I think Venables is going to trust that his read on that particular individual, whoever it may be, is accurate, is straight on, and that's somebody that's going to be able to raise the bottom line for Oklahoma football.
We've got Parker Thune here to talk Oklahoma football. Much going on. The Sooners, of course, wrapped up the season with a 69-45 win over TCU, await a bowl bid. And, of course, more importantly, an offensive coordinator position needs to be filled. You can catch Parker at KREF Sports each and every Monday through Friday, 12 to 3 Central Time. OU Insider as well at Rivals. So the list of names, we could go on and on. We can grab about 5 or 6 here. You got Seth Luttrell, Matt Wells, Sean Lewis, Andy Ludwig, Cliff Kingsbury, and again, others. We could go on and on. Many of those obviously have ties to the program, either currently, in Matt Wells' case, or in the past. Any particular guys stand out to you as either you think they're probably headed in this direction, or you think they should be headed in this direction?
Well, I'll tell you this, Mark, based on some of the early conversations I've had regarding this vacancy, and look, it's been less than 48 hours since Lebby was, or Lebby officially accepted the Mississippi State job and was announced as their head coach. So it is still very, very early on in this process, but the intel I have as of this moment would suggest that the Sooners are going to try to keep this in-house. Now, whether or not that happens is a different matter entirely. Again, there are a million factors to consider when you're hiring for such a consequential position as offensive coordinator. But you have 3 strong candidates in-house that I would rank probably as follows. Number 1 would be Joe John Finley, Oklahoma's tight ends coach, and a guy that has worked on the same staffs as Lebby for years. The first order of business is convincing him not to follow Lebby to Mississippi State, which, based on some of the intel I've gathered, seems he has a preference to stay at Oklahoma, assuming the Sooners can make it worth his while with a raise. I'm sure would help. Additional responsibilities would help as well. And that's one guy that Lebby, on his way out the door, apparently vouched for and said, hey, if you want to keep things, if you want to maintain continuity here, Joe John Finley is a guy that I would trust to run the offense here at Oklahoma. So he's got the Lebby stamp of approval. He's a guy that has been regarded across the industry the last few years as somebody that is on the precipice of making the jump to being an OC and has those capabilities. So as far as in-house candidates go, I would actually rank him slightly above Luttrell as far as likelihood. Luttrell obviously comes from that Mike Leach coaching tree, somebody that has been a play caller, has been a head coach, has been in the coaching profession for upwards of 2 decades now. So he's been around the block. He was relieved of duty last year as North Texas's head coach, came up to Oklahoma to join the staff as an off-field analyst. He's a strong candidate as well. I think with Matt Wells, his background coaching quarterbacks gives you some flexibility there, because if they were to promote Finley to being the primary play caller, you could slot Matt Wells in as your quarterbacks coach, because in losing Lebby, you not only lose your play caller, you lose your quarterbacks coach as well. If it's Luttrell, then you kind of have some conflict there, because Luttrell has only ever coached running backs and tight ends. So who coaches quarterbacks at that point, and how do you fit them onto the staff? That becomes the question if it's Luttrell. If it's Finley, you just say, okay, Matt Wells, you coach quarterbacks, leave it at that. Or if you wanted to hire Wells as offensive coordinator, give him that promotion, you could go that route as well. Now, as far as external candidates go, I think the ones that I am watching would be Andy Kotelnicki at Kansas, a guy that has gotten the best football out of Jalen Daniels, that's for sure, over the last couple of years. And that Kansas offense has soared to new heights. Now, he has a long history with Lance Leipold. So is he willing to bolt on Leipold? I don't know. I would question that. So that's why I'm not terribly confident in that one. Willie Korn is a guy that played at Clemson back in the day, so has ties to several OU staffers. He has had nothing but success as offensive coordinator at Coastal Carolina and now Liberty. He moved with Jamie Chadwell up to Liberty to join that staff and has the Flames sitting at 12-0 right now. So that would be another strong external candidate that I would keep in mind. Now, beyond that, Brennan Marion, the OC at UNLV, he's got quite the market for his services right now. He's up for head coaching positions at places like San Diego State, Oregon State, UTEP. But he's also, I'm not sure whether he is ready to jump at just any head coaching opportunity. I think it would have to be the right one. And so with that in mind, maybe he doesn't take a head coaching job. Maybe he just takes a bigger OC job. Oklahoma and Arkansas are 2 jobs that would make sense for him. He played wide receiver at Tulsa and has coached in the past at Oklahoma Baptist, which is about 45 minutes east of the OKC metro area out in Shawnee. So he has Oklahoma ties. That's certainly a guy to watch as well.
So Jeff Lebby moves on to Mississippi State. Oklahoma awaits a bowl bid. Could the selection of a starting quarterback, first of all, give us a bit of a lean on whether Dylan Gabriel, after working with Jeff Lebby for 2 years, could be moving on to Mississippi State as a possible transfer? Again, any thoughts on who may start the bowl game?
Well, I would imagine that Oklahoma doesn't have a ton of departures prior to the bowl game. If you're looking at a guy like Dylan Gabriel, who, you know, was recruited by Jeff Lebby, played for Jeff Lebby at both UCF and OU, has a 6th year of eligibility if he wants to use it, maybe has desire to reunite with Lebby at Mississippi State. I think Gabriel's enough of a team guy that even if he were to do that, he would stick it out at Oklahoma through the bowl game. I also don't think there's anybody on this OU roster right now that has good enough draft stock to be able to sit out the bowl game. Now, maybe right tackle Tyler Guyton is the lone exception. He's been mocked as high as the first round by some experts, but I know internally the thought is he won't quite end up with the draft grade that he thinks he will at this point. So I know they're trying to convince him to come back. They'll certainly convince him to try and play in the bowl game, but I don't think you're dealing with a situation like maybe you were a year ago where Oklahoma had 2 tackles that were early round draft picks and everybody knew it. And Anton Harrison, who ended up being a first rounder, and Wanye Morris, who ended up being a 3rd rounder. Those 2 guys opted out. But you look, for instance, at a guy like Marvin Mims, who was taken in the 2nd round by the Denver Broncos. He played in the bowl game. And that's because, you know, the Oklahoma culture is strong these days. And a lot of these guys are, you know, they have the right influences within this program to not do the selfish thing. And look, sometimes the selfish thing is what you feel like you have to do, right? For Anton Harrison, again, he was getting drafted in the 1st round regardless. So do you want to run the risk of tearing an ACL or something like that? No, it makes a lot of sense for that guy to sit out. But if you're not sure that you're going to be a 1st round pick, and trust me, there is nobody on this Oklahoma roster that can be anywhere close to certain about that, even Guyton, then I think the culture is strong enough at Oklahoma that they're going to be able to keep the nucleus together for this bowl game, whatever it may be. I mean, obviously the Alamo Bowl is probably the likely landing spot right now, but depending on how things go this weekend, Oklahoma could backdoor their way into a New Year's Six.
Parker Thune, KREF Sports, OU Insider. This is actually, folks, even though the regular season is over, the time to lock in because the staff changes, National Signing Day, of course, in less than 3 weeks, on and on and on. The transfer portal will be open here in just a couple of days. Already announcements of who is entering the transfer portal are out there. December 4th is the official start. While we're still in the coaching ranks, of course, there's a dynamic that we talked to you several times about when Brent Venables was named a head coach, because he is considered one of the best minds in college football on the defensive side. Ted Roof's the defensive coordinator. You know, how do you believe, of course, the defense improved considerably this past year, how much Venables is still involved and whether he could be looking at a new defensive coordinator or if we expect any kind of changes on that side of the ball?
Yeah, well, if you look at the trajectory of Roof's career, he is very much a nomad, has never stayed at one place for very long at all. I think that he's only, and I would have to fact check this, but I believe he's only ever been at one job in his entire coaching career for longer than 3 years. And he's made 15, 16 different stops in nearly 4 decades in the profession at this point. So he's somebody that, like the man in black said, he's been everywhere. And his contract expires at the end of the season. I think most kind of viewed Roof as a guy that was going to be at Oklahoma for a year or two, and then his time was going to be up. He'd either retire or go find a job closer to home in Georgia that might carry him over into retirement. And so, to be honest with you, Mark, I don't expect Roof back in 2024. Now, that creates a hole at linebackers coach, because he coaches linebackers in addition to being nominally the defensive coordinator. To me, I and nobody will ever give you a straight answer, obviously. I think this is a lot more Venables calling the shots defensively than Roof. But I think if you have a vacancy at linebackers coach, it presents a ton of intriguing possibilities. There is one name that has been floated in connection to Oklahoma for over a year at this point. And it's interesting because it's the guy that Jeff Lebby just replaced at Mississippi State, Zach Arnett. And Zach Arnett has kind of been regarded as a top candidate to be the next linebackers coach at Oklahoma. once Roof's time has come and gone. Another guy that I can potentially see being in the mix would be Brian Odom, who has coached linebackers at Oklahoma before and actually left Oklahoma at the end of the 2021 season to go with Lincoln Riley to USC because obviously at that point he doesn't know whether he has a job or not when the new staff comes in, whether Venables wants to coach linebackers himself. So he decided, you know what, for me, it's probably the best option if I just go out to USC. Now, he played at Oklahoma, was a high school football star, one of the greatest in the history of the state, in Ada, Oklahoma. So he's got deep, deep ties. And I have to think would be willing to come back in a heartbeat based on some of the conversations I've had surrounding Odom. Now, the other guy that could potentially be the wild card here would be a former Venables protege who is a GA right now at Oklahoma in James Skalski, the former All-American linebacker at Clemson. Now, it would be a big, big responsibility for somebody that young. He's 25. So for somebody that young to get their first on-field coaching gig at a place like Oklahoma, that's pretty unprecedented, Mark. That's pretty seismic. But I think when you consider the fact that Venables himself is a linebackers coach by trade and is heavily involved with the coaching and development of the linebackers, it's not all on Skalski, which alleviates some of the pressure that would come with that responsibility, that job. I think if you wanted to go that route and Skalski was your next linebackers coach, I think you could do a lot worse. I'll put it that way, because Skalski himself is somebody that has become very well respected by the players and staff alike, has that youthful exuberance and enthusiasm for the game. And I'll tell you this much, he still looks like he could go out and give you 120 tackles.
Yeah, he is a prototype linebacker. There's no question about there in regards to mentality and game face and determination and toughness. No doubt about that. Parker Thune's here breaking down Oklahoma football for us. You mentioned the Alamo Bowl, possible New Year's Six, a small possibility there. I think it's kind of sad what has happened to bowl season. People still watch. We still watch. People make fun of it and say, oh, we got all these opt-outs. And, of course, we've always made fun of largely the names of some of these bowl games and how they change every 3 years. But at the same time, they're great TV events. Do you care about bowl season? Do you care about Oklahoma's bowl bid?
I mean, do I care? Yeah. Now, admittedly, is it less engaging when you potentially have to worry about 3 or 4 of the 5 best players between those two teams sitting out in preparation for the NFL draft? Yeah. At that point, like I think back to the Cheez-It Bowl last year where Oklahoma got matched up with a Florida State team that ended up winning double-digit games. And Florida State had pretty much all their horses available. Oklahoma had numerous opt-outs. And the fact that Oklahoma was even able to make a game of that is a credit to Venables and that staff, having their guys prepared and ready to go and having the second teamers that had to fill the void left by some of those first stringers, having those guys ready to play and play at a high level. But yeah, Mark, especially if it's not a New Year's Six Bowl these days, a lot of the fun has been taken out of it, because even if you do have a Cinderella-esque team that ends up making a bowl run and is one of those teams that you would consider fun to watch, I think of a program like Liberty this year, for instance, right, with Caden Salter at quarterback. They're 12-0, probably not going to go to a New Year's Six, but obviously, like, that's the best season in the history of that football program. If you get to a bowl game, and Caden Salter, their quarterback, is not old enough. He's only a sophomore. He might be a junior. But anyway, slice it. That's not a guy that's going to sit out. But say you have a team like that that's 11-1, 12-0 going into bowl season, and they're riding the wave behind a player or two that's just really, really good. And those players opt out in preparation for the NFL draft. Well, it takes all the air out of that bowl game, doesn't it? Because, you watch a team like that for the sake of watching a player like that. And when that player is no longer involved in the equation, there's not nearly as much of a compelling narrative storyline surrounding the game. So, yeah, look, it's the age we live in. We'll get accustomed to it in time. Opt-outs really only started, as far as I can recall, the first opt-outs as we know them today started happening in 2016, maybe 27. Leonard Fournette, I recall. Christian
Christian
McCaffrey was an
McCaffrey.
early
Yeah.
one. Yeah,
Those
and
are the
so
first two I remember.
it's
Yep.
still a pretty new phenomenon. We'll get used to it in time, but yeah, I understand why some folks don't love it. And is it good for college football? I feel like you'd probably say pretty definitively, no, it's not, because you would rather have those guys playing in bowl season than sitting out. But bowl season is bowl season. It's fun regardless.
As a guy that's into ratings and rankings and comparisons and trying to figure out who's got the best conference, that's what I always enjoyed, because you had, for the first time, you can guarantee like seeded teams are going to play from the Power Five in bowl games. But then when you get the opt outs equation into it, then it takes away from trying to clearly determine who's the better team, therefore, by extension, the better conference. And you bring up a situation with Liberty. We see them rack up this kind of season, and then the ultimate test is, oh, let's see them play a decent Power Five team. Well, the Power Five team's got 5 or 6 opt-outs. Okay, we really can't come to a conclusion on that result.
Yep.
So it is what it is, like you state. Also, what it is, and people have been awaiting this for quite some time, is Oklahoma's schedule for 2024. We'll post it here in a second. Does anything in particular stand out?
So has the schedule been finalized, or just those couple matchups?
Just so what I'm seeing is just the number of teams involved, who the opponents are.
Yeah.
And then, yes, so
Well, I'll tell you, that Tulane game, if it does end up being played on September 14th, I guess it doesn't really matter when it ends up getting played, but that Tulane game, especially if Willie Fritz stays at Tulane another year, man, that's interesting. It's not often you see a G5 non-conference team or a G5 team in non-conference play, and you're like, oh, that could get interesting. But that's definitely the case for the Sooners going up against Tulane. Obviously, as far as the schedule goes, it's year one in the SEC. I anticipate there are going to be some bumps in the road for Oklahoma, because it's it's a different ballgame than what they're used to. But you do get two of your biggest games versus Tennessee and versus Alabama. You get those two at home. The road trips, LSU is obviously, I think, going to be the most daunting. We don't know what that LSU team is going to look like in a world post Jaden Daniels, excuse me. But you're not, I don't think you're super intimidated by those trips to Jordan-Hare, to Missouri, Ole Miss and the Grove. I feel like that one could go either way. Again, we don't really know what that team is going to look like either. So much can change, Mark, with the transfer portal these days, that, the way a team looks heading into next season in December might be a completely different story come February. So I take it all with a grain of salt right now, but I do think, all things considered, for year one in the SEC, that is a manageable schedule for Oklahoma. Not an easy one by any stretch of the imagination, because nothing comes easy in the Southeastern Conference. But, you dodge Georgia. Don't have to deal with going up against them. Again, you get Alabama at home. You get Tennessee at home. You do got to go on the road to LSU and to Ole Miss. But it could be a lot more daunting than it is for Oklahoma with that 2024 slate.
Yeah, there are definitely some misses at the top of the conference, or what we expect to be the top of the conference. Like you say, it used to be kind of formulaic to be able to say, okay, this is what this particular team's going to look like next year, because they're going to go to the NFL draft. We got this recruiting class. A few of them may make an impact, and here's your team for next year. But that is no longer the case, because the transfer portal has turned things upside down. I will say, on the bottom end of the SEC, though, Oklahoma's gaining no favors, and there is no Arkansas, no Vandy, no Mississippi State. Those are the first three that pop out as bottom tier almost definitely bottom tier SEC teams that Oklahoma doesn't get a chance to see and most likely notch a win against.
Yeah. Look, again, it's so hard to get, because if we were looking at this, like, let's say Oklahoma jumps to the SEC a year earlier in 2023, and we're looking at this in December of 2022, and we're looking at that matchup with Missouri, Mark. We're like,
Yep.
oh, Oklahoma will handle Missouri. Nothing really to worry about there. And then Missouri pops off and ends up being a 10-win team out of nowhere. So
Yep.
this will be worth revisiting a couple months down the road, because I think with at least a couple of those teams, our feelings will change drastically as to how they're looking going into 2024. But yeah, at least as things stand right now, you get a lot of teams that occupy that middle tier in the SEC, where maybe you don't get to go beat up on Vanderbilt. Maybe you don't get a punching bag somewhere along the line. But again, don't have to play Georgia either, which these days you can pretty much chalk that one up as an L.
Yeah, Oklahoma fans, if you want to go through this exercise, take Oklahoma's current schedule here in 2023 and rank their opponents in the Big 12, and then take their 2024 schedule, rank their opponents in the SEC, and then see at what point there's a drop off. And I believe you're going to see a considerable difference, as Parker mentions, in the upgrade of the schedule. And you saw at the bottom of the schedule, the Maine Black Bears. So Oklahoma can, of course, look forward to an additional non-conference game, of which they will most likely, and it's understandable, be looking for an opponent that they can basically scrimmage like the rest of the SEC does, as we see with those SEC non-conference schedules. No reason to pick on somebody else outside in the Power Five to just pile up another additional difficult game. Parker Thune's here, KREF Sports, 12 to 3 Central Time, Monday through Friday, OU Insider. Parker, anything in particular that you want to let people know about?
Well, there is so much on my mind right now. I would tell people, hey, you know what? If you're a Sooner fan, you want to stay up to date with what's going on behind the scenes in the program, especially with this OC search, go sign up at ouinsider.com. It'll cost you a few bucks a month, and we will keep you up to date, literally on an hourly basis throughout the duration of this OC search. We're posting information constantly, touching base with sources, checking in, getting you the latest intel. So ouinsider.com is the place to go. If you want to know what's going on there, what the impact is going to be on recruiting, who's been interviewed, who's going to be interviewed, who's in consideration, all that good stuff.
Parker, we thank you so much for dropping by. Always appreciate the intel and the insight. Know that you have a ton of things going on. So thanks so much for being here.
Of course, Mark. I appreciate it. Take care.
Parker Thune, one of the very best in the industry covering Oklahoma football, recruiting. And of course, this is a time when things get crazy. Transfer portal opens on Monday, December 4th. National Signing Day, the early signing day in which about 90 to 95% of the players will be signing in less than 3 weeks. Bowl bid coming out after the college football playoff rankings are revealed on Sunday, and the playoff seeds. And what am I missing? Coaching changes, of course. The offensive coordinator position with Jeff Lebby heading to Mississippi State. Here's the deal, folks. Hang on with me for just 1 minute, not even that, 10 seconds, to let you know that you are watching Sooners Live here at the Voice of College Football. We cannot commit to a specific day and time right now, but it is my pursuit each and every week to grab Parker, John Williams, John Hoover, other Oklahoma insiders to present an Oklahoma live show here each and every week, at least one, possibly two here each and every week. So make sure that you're subscribed, hit the bell for the notifications. You may notice that we are broadcasting here, doing the live stream on the SG1 Sports Network, Oklahoma. There have been some situations involving our relationship with SG1 Sports. They continue to cover and carry the Oklahoma show here. But we would like for you to know that we've got an SEC channel. So we got a Big 12 channel. We're guessing that you're not too interested in the Big 12 channel right now, that it's more about the SEC in the future, of course. We've got an SEC channel that we just launched. We will simulcast this show over on the SEC channel going forward. And we would hope that you would check it out and subscribe right there. Where can you find it? Well, I am dropping the channel link in the chat right now. So please check it out. We do SEC content every week, 5 or 6 videos, predictions, and we will carry this show over on the SEC channel. So please check it out. The link is now in the chat. Thank you so much for being here. Again, we will be here. Our pursuit is every week with an OU insider at least once a week right here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. Again, check out the SEC channel because we are moving this show there at some point and would like for you to not lose connection with us here at the Voice of College Football. Appreciate you being here. Our next show is Iowa Hawkeyes Live at 5:30 Eastern Time over on the Hawkeyes channel. We get together with Steve Days on Michigan podcast today, so please check that out later in the day. We do our college football playoff watch party tonight at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. That's over on the main channel. If you're not aware, just look up Voice of College Football, put it right in the search bar on YouTube. You'll be able to find it easy. Our main channel watch party, college football playoff rankings, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, where I take your calls on the latest rankings right here at the Voice of College Football. We appreciate you being here. You know what I need to do is check out your comments, see if there's anything that we need to address. There we go. Jackson's here. Look at that. Jackson on the spot. Big 12 football at the Voice of College Football. Need to get to 1,000 subs. Please check it out. Again, Voice of College Football. We understand the transition of Oklahoma and, yes, boo, Texas, and the transition from the Big 12. We have simulcasted those shows on the Big 12 channel, and we might as well just go ahead. I was going to wait until the end of the season, but I think at this point, now that the regular season's over, you OU fans are SEC-minded. We're going to move the show over to the SEC channel, so please join us there. Hey, if you're still interested in the Big 12, obviously, Bedlam and everything that the Big 12 still provides, please check out our Big 12 channel. I'm dropping the link to the Big 12 channel as well right now. All right, folks. Appreciate you being here. Want to make sure that I don't miss anything. As Wet Blanket says, Sooners enjoy watching your two rivals play each other in Arlington. Yes, Oklahoma State and Texas, of course. And Wet Blanket and others, we are going to have a Big 12 championship game live preview. And that's coming up Wednesday at 2 Eastern on the main channel and on the Big 12 channel. So please join us for that. Again, Big 12 championship preview live. And we'll do that Wednesday at 2 p.m. Eastern time. And again, Jackson, thank you so much for all that you're doing for us. Appreciate that. We also have John here. John will be previewing Michigan, Iowa on the Michigan Live Show. That's tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern time on the Michigan channel. So please join John for a Big 10 championship preview there. Joey's here. We got all the staples. Joey's here as well. And Joey and I are putting together a Big 12 season finale spectacular. I'm talking about with insiders, media from every Big 12 team. And we will include Oklahoma and Texas as a parting gift and do a Big 12 extravaganza at the end of the season. And look to do that really with every conference as we've done in the past. All right. Yes, Mike 3883. Thank you so much for encouraging everyone to hit the like button. Speaking of the Big 12, here's another Big 12 note. We've got the Biggest 12 show, the Biggest 12 with Clint Foster. That's coming up tonight at 7:30 Eastern time. You can catch that on the Big 12 channel as well. So please lock it in on the SEC channel, the Big 12 channel. It's the Biggest 12. And it's Clint's look at the Big 12 each and every week. And you just need to check it out once. Clint has a unique and fun way of looking at college football. So check out The Biggest 12 with Clint. Appreciate you being here at the Voice of College Football. Again, next show, Iowa Hawkeyes live at 5:30 Eastern, Big Ten Championship game preview. I'll be on with Steve Dace, Michigan podcast this afternoon. That'll be released later today. Watch party for the college football playoff rankings at 7 Eastern tonight. See you then.